The giant ship appeared in the sky on a sunny Tuesday. It hung over Seoul like a dark cloud. People stopped and stared. Some ran. Others took pictures. Commander Ta stood straight in his crisp uniform. As head of Korea's first contact team, he waited on the landing pad with 10 soldiers behind him. His heart beat fast, but his face showed nothing. "Sir, are you sure we should meet them here?" "In the city?" asked his aide. "We show strength by not hiding," said Ta. He watched the small shuttlecraft break off from the main ship. It flew down toward them with a quiet hum. The world had been in chaos for 3 days since the alien ships appeared over major cities. These aliens, who called themselves the Nurek, had sent messages in perfect human languages. They wanted to talk. They said they came in peace. Tai did not believe them. 20 years in the military had taught him that no one travels across stars just to make friends. The shuttle landed. A door opened with a hiss of air. First came 4 large shapes that made Ta's eyes widen. They looked like gorillas, but wrong. Too big, too straight. They walked on 2 legs with perfect balance. Their dark eyes scanned everything. Each one carried a metal staff and wore armor that seemed to shift colors like oil on water. These were the guards. Then came the Nurek themselves. They had 6 limbs, 4 arms, and 2 legs. Their skin was pale blue, and they had no hair. Their faces had 3 eyes set in a triangle. They wore simple white clothes that seemed to flow like water. "Welcome to Earth," said Ta with a bow. "I am Commander Ta of the Korean Defense Force." The tallest Nurek stepped forward. "I am High Commander for. We accept your welcome." Its voice sounded strange, like 3 people talking at once. Ta led them to the meeting room in the nearby government building. Dr. Han, Korea's top scientist who studied apes, joined them. She couldn't stop staring at the gorilla-like guards. "May I ask about your companions?" she asked. The Nurek made a sound like bells. "You admire our war apes. They are our greatest creation. We took simple animals like your planet's gorillas and made them better, stronger, smarter." One of the war apes turned its head to look at Dr. Han. Its eyes held intelligence that made her shiver. High Commander Vor continued, "We have studied your world. Your humans are the dominant species, yet you are weak. No armor in your skin, no natural weapons. How strange that such fragile creatures rule a planet." "We have our strengths," said Tai, feeling anger rise in his chest. "Indeed, your minds have potential. This is why we have come." Finally, they reached the real talk. The Nurek wanted Earth's water, minerals, and some plants they found interesting. In return, they offered technology. "And if we decline?" asked Ta. The High Commander's middle eye blinked slowly. "It would be unfortunate. Your weapons cannot harm our ships. Our war apes alone could take your cities. They are built for battle, strong, obedient, and fearless." As if to demonstrate, the High Commander made a small gesture. One of the war apes stepped forward, grabbed a metal chair, and crushed it with one hand. Metal twisted like paper. Dr. Han watched carefully. "Impressive strength," she said, "but strength isn't everything." The war ape looked at her again. This time, she saw something else in its eyes. Something empty, like a machine waiting for orders. "You have 1 Earth week to discuss our offers with your leaders," said the High Commander. "We are generous, but our patience has limits." After the aliens left, Tai turned to Dr. Han. "What do you think?" Dr. Han was still staring at the door where the war apes had gone. "Those creatures, they're powerful, but there's something missing in them." "What do you mean?" "They've been engineered to remove disobedience, to kill their spirit." She looked at Todd with sudden intensity. "I have an idea. It's crazy, but it might be our only chance." "I'm listening," said Todd. "They have war apes bred for blind obedience. But what if we could create something they wouldn't expect? Something with all the strength but none of the obedience. What are you suggesting? Dr. Han took a deep breath. Commander, what do you know about chimpanzees? Dr. Han stood before Colonel June and his team of military leaders. 3 days had passed since the Nurek's visit. The room was tense. So you want to fight alien war apes with chimps? Colonel June raised an eyebrow. Are you serious? Very serious, said Dr. Han. She clicked a button, and a video played on the wall screen. It showed a chimp in a cage. The animal moved with quick, sharp movements. Its eyes looked smart and angry. This is Da. He was rescued from an illegal fighting ring 2 years ago. People trained him to fight other chimps for betting money. Dr. Han's voice was calm, but her eyes were sad. He knows how to hurt others. He knows how to win. Colonel June leaned forward. And you think he can fight those alien monsters? They're twice his size. Size isn't everything, Colonel. Chimps are pound for pound stronger than humans. They're fast. And most importantly, they think differently. She showed another video. This one from a security camera in her lab. It showed Da using a stick to reach a banana that was far away. Then he used the same stick to unlock his cage door. This happened last year. He waited until night when fewer staff were around. He planned it. Did he escape? Asked the young officer. No. He let out 2 other chimps, raided our food storage, and went back to his cage. He just wanted to show us he could do it. Colonel June rubbed his chin. Smart animal. But the Nurek war apes are engineered to be super smart. Yes, but also super obedient, Dr. Han said. That's their weakness. They follow orders perfectly. They don't improvise. They don't hold grudges. They don't fight dirty. She switched to another screen that showed brain scans. The Nurek war apes have enhanced brains, but controlled ones. Our chimps still have their wild instincts, plus all the street smarts they learned the hard way. Colonel June stood up and walked to the window. Outside, military vehicles were moving into position. The world was preparing for war. The talks with the Nurek were not going well. How many chimps do you have? He asked. 5 that I think are ready. 20 more that could be trained. And how would you make them fight alien war apes? They'd be scared. Dr. Han smiled slightly. Colonel, these aren't zoo animals. These are survivors. Da was forced to fight for years. Sun was kept in a tiny cage as an illegal pet. Wan was beaten in a circus. Bin was used for painful tests. Mun escaped from a lab where they did experiments on his brain. She pointed at the brain scans again. I've developed a neural implant. It would boost their intelligence, help them understand complex ideas, but it won't change who they are. And who are they? Asked Colonel June. Fighters. Survivors. And they all have one thing in common. They don't trust authority. They don't follow rules. They do what works. Colonel June was quiet for a long time. The other officers watched him, waiting. Finally, he turned around. The Nurek will expect us to fight with tanks and planes, with soldiers who follow orders. He nodded slowly. They won't expect this. Dr. Han's eyes lit up. So you'll approve Project Primate? Yes. But I want to meet these chimps first. Of course. But Colonel, Dr. Han's face became serious. Remember that these animals have been hurt by humans before. Don't expect them to salute you. Colonel June almost smiled. I don't need their respect, Doctor. I just need them to hate the enemy more than they hate us. Dr. Han nodded. That I can promise you. When can we start? Now, said Colonel June. The Nurek just destroyed our base in Japan. We have 4 days until their deadline. As they left the room, Dr. Han touched the colonel's arm. There's one more thing you should know. What's that? Our chimps won't just fight for us. If we do this right, they'll fight for themselves, for their freedom. And nothing fights harder than something that wants to be free. Colonel June watched from behind thick glass as Dr. Han entered the large room. 5 chimps sat in a circle on the floor. They were not in cages. They were not chained. This made Colonel June nervous. "Are you sure this is safe?" he asked through the speaker. Dr. Han didn't look back. "No, but we don't have time for safe." She sat down on the floor with the chimps. The largest one, Dai, moved closer to her. His face had a scar across his right eye. His hands looked strong enough to break bones. "This is Da," said Dr. Han. "He was the champion in an underground fighting ring. He's won over 50 fights against other chimps, some against dogs too." Day picked up an apple from a bowl and bit into it. His eyes never left Colonel June behind the glass. "He doesn't look friendly," said Colonel June. "He's not, but he respects strength and fairness. He protects the others." Dr. Han pointed to a smaller chimp with bright eyes that moved constantly. "That's Sun. He was kept in a tiny cage for 10 years. The cage was so small he couldn't stand up. But his mind is amazing. He solves puzzles faster than any chimp I've ever seen." Sun was playing with a metal cube that had different colored sides. His fingers moved quickly, solving the puzzle cube in seconds. Then he took it apart to see how it worked. "This is Juan," Dr. Han continued, pointing to a chimp who was swinging from a rope in the corner. "He was in a circus. They taught him to do tricks with fire and explosives. He understands how things blow up." Juan did a perfect flip and landed on his feet. He made a sound like laughter. "The quiet one is Bin," said Dr. Han. A thin chimp sat alone, watching a screen that showed pictures changing quickly. He was raised alone in a lab. No mother, no friends. They were testing how isolation affects development. He doesn't trust anyone except other chimps, but he can remember everything he sees. Colonel June noticed that Bin's eyes moved in perfect time with the changing pictures. He wasn't just watching. He was studying. And finally, Mun. Dr. Han pointed to a chimp who was moving around the edges of the room, checking every corner and door. He escaped from a brain research lab 3 years ago. No one knows how he got out. He disabled security cameras and picked locks. He helped 7 other chimps escape too. Mun suddenly stopped and stared directly at a hidden camera in the corner that Colonel June didn't even know was there. "These 5 have something the HFY Apes don't have," said Dr. Han. "They have real-world experience. They've solved problems to survive. They fought when the odds were against them. And they've won." Colonel June watched as Dai shared his apple with Sun. The chimps had a bond. "What's your plan exactly?" he asked. Dr. Han pulled out a small metal device from her pocket. "This neural implant will boost their intelligence, not just make them smarter, but help them understand human language, strategy, and technology." "Will it make them obedient?" asked Colonel June. "No," said Dr. Han firmly. "That would defeat the purpose. The HFY Apes are obedient soldiers. We need something different. We need fighters who think for themselves." Day stood up and walked to the glass. He placed his hand against it, exactly opposite Colonel June's face. His eyes were deep and knowing. "He understands what we're talking about," said Colonel June. It wasn't a question. "Yes, they all do, more or less. And they know what the HFY are. I've shown them videos. And they want to fight." Dr. Han looked at the chimps. They want freedom. They want respect. And yes, some of them want to fight. Especially Da. "When can you do the implants?" asked Colonel June. "Tomorrow. But first, your men need to meet them. Not as animals. As team members." Colonel June nodded. "I'll bring Lieutenant Jin and his Special Forces unit. They'll be working together." He looked at Dai again. "Let's hope they get along." Dr. Han smiled slightly. "They won't. Not at first. But they'll learn." Lieutenant Jin did not like this plan. He stood with his 5 best soldiers in the training yard. Across from them were the 5 chimps. The animals now had small metal discs attached to the backs of their heads. The neural implants Dr. Han had created. "This is a waste of time," Jin said to Colonel June. "We should be preparing real weapons, not playing with monkeys." "Apes," corrected Dr. Han as she walked up. And they can understand you now. Jin looked at the chimps. Dad, the big one with the scar, was staring at him. The chimp's eyes seemed different now, more focused, more aware. Fine, Apes, said Jin. But we have 3 days until the Nurek deadline. My men need real training. This is real training, said Colonel Jun. The Nurek war apes will be stronger than any human. We need to learn how to fight alongside our own apes. Dr. Han stepped forward. The neural implants are working better than expected. They can understand Korean and some English. They can use simple weapons, and they can learn tactics. Jin was not convinced. Show me. Dr. Han nodded to Da. The chimp walked to a table where different objects were laid out. He picked up a knife, tested its edge with his thumb, and then set it down. Next, he picked up a grenade, studied how it worked, and carefully placed it back. He selected a small handgun, checked if it was loaded, and then offered it to Dr. Han, handle first. Jin's eyes widened. That's impressive. They're learning fast, said Dr. Han. But they still need to learn how to work with humans. That's why you're here. Colonel Jun stepped forward. Today's exercise is simple. Your team against their team. Capture the flag. Jin looked at the red flag in the middle of the training yard. What are the rules? No serious injuries, said Colonel Jun. Everything else is fair game. Jin smiled. This would be easy. His men were the best in Korea. They had years of training. These chimps had only had their implants for a day. Begin, shouted Colonel Jun. Jin signaled his men to move in standard formation. 2 men on the sides, 2 in the center, 1 watching the rear. They moved carefully toward the flag. The chimps did not move in formation. They scattered instantly. Juan climbed up a nearby wall. Sun ran straight forward, and then stopped, watching everything. Then disappeared into the shadows of a building. Mun circled around the edges of the yard, and Daz stood still, looking right at Jin. Keep moving, Jin told his men. Don't let them distract you. They were halfway to the flag when everything went wrong. Juan dropped something from the wall, smoke bombs. They weren't real weapons, just training devices, but thick smoke covered the area. Jin lost sight of his men. Stay in formation, he shouted, but it was too late. He heard shouts and thuds as his men were attacked from different directions. The chimps moved through the smoke like it wasn't there, using their sense of smell to find Jin's team. Jin ran for the flag. He could still win this, but as he reached for it, a hand grabbed his wrist. It was Da. The chimp's grip was like iron. Let go, said Jin, trying to break free. Day made a series of hand gestures. It took Jin a moment to realize it was military sign language mixed with some chimp signs. Day was saying, "You lose." When the smoke cleared, all of Jin's men were sitting on the ground. None were hurt, but all had been caught. Sun held the flag, looking proud. How? Asked Jin, stunned. They didn't fight like soldiers, said Dr. Han, smiling. They fought like street fighters. They made their own plan, used the environment, and targeted the weakest points. Jin looked at Dad with new respect. That's exactly what we need against the Nurek war apes. Colonel Jun nodded. The Nurek expect us to fight like soldiers, with rules and formations. These chimps don't care about rules. They care about winning. Jin walked up to Dai and offered his hand. After a moment, Day took it. Let's try again, said Jin. But this time, teach us how you think. The chimps looked at each other and made a series of quick gestures, their own language combined with the signs they had learned. Day turned back to Jin and nodded. Training had truly begun. The day the Nurek attacked, it was raining. They did not wait for their own deadline. Their ships appeared over the Korean DMZ at dawn. Large doors opened in their ships, and the war apes jumped out. Colonel Jun watched the screens in the command center. The alien war apes wore armor that changed color to match their surroundings. They carried long metal staffs that shot blue energy. They moved in perfect lines, like machines. "Our tanks can't stop them," reported a general. "The war apes are too fast, and their weapons cut through our armor." Colonel Jun picked up his phone. "It's time. Send in Lieutenant Jin's team." Dr. Han stood beside him, her face pale. "The chimps aren't fully trained yet." "No one is ever fully trained for war," said Colonel Jun. "But we're out of time." Lieutenant Jin and his team were in a transport helicopter with the 5 chimps. Over the past 2 days, they had trained together nonstop. The chimps wore light body armor made just for them. They each carried weapons they had chosen themselves. Da had a metal staff similar to the war ape's weapons, but shorter. Sun carried small explosives. Juan had a backpack full of tools and wires. Bin wore special glasses that helped him see heat and movement. Mun had climbing gear and a sharp knife. "Remember the plan," Jin told them. "We defend the bridge. We do not let the war apes cross into Seoul." Day made a sign with his hands. "Bad plan." Jin frowned. "What do you mean?" Sun joined in with more signs. "Open ground. No advantage. Need buildings." Jin shook his head. "Our orders are to hold the bridge." The chimps looked at each other. Then Day signed. "New plan. Follow us." The helicopter landed near the bridge. Already they could see the war apes in the distance, moving toward them in perfect lines. There were at least 30 of them. "Get in position," Jin ordered his men. But the chimps had other ideas. Day grabbed Jin's arm and pointed toward the city. "We can't retreat," Jin said. Day shook his head and signed. "Not retreat. Trap." Jin hesitated. His orders were clear, but he had learned to trust Day's instincts. "Okay," he said finally. "What's the plan?" 30 minutes later, the Nurek war apes reached the bridge. They found it empty. No defenders. They'd moved across in perfect formation, each step in time with the others. Their orders were simple: enter the city and secure it for the Nurek landing party. They entered the narrow streets of Seoul. Tall buildings rose on both sides. The streets were empty of people. Everyone had been evacuated. It was quiet. Too quiet. The lead war ape stopped. Something was wrong. It looked up just in time to see Juan drop from a window above. The chimp landed on the war ape's shoulders and slapped something onto its armor. A small device with blinking lights. Juan jumped away. The device exploded. It wasn't big, but it hit the right spot. The neural control unit on the back of the war ape's head. The massive creature stumbled, confused without its connection to the Nurek commands. That was the signal. Chimps and soldiers attacked from all sides. They had set up positions in buildings all along the street. They dropped nets and bombs from above. They fired special darts that confused the war ape's armor systems. They used the tight space of the street to trap the larger creatures. The war apes tried to fight back. They were strong, much stronger than the chimps or humans, but they didn't know how to fight without their formations. They had never trained for ambushes or street fighting. Their perfect discipline became a weakness when their plans fell apart. Day faced a war ape twice his size. The alien creature swung its staff with perfect form. Day didn't bother with form. He ducked, jumped on a nearby car, and threw dirt in the war ape's eyes. When it tried to clear its vision, Day struck the control unit on its head. One by one, the war apes fell, not because the chimps were stronger, but because they fought with every dirty trick they knew. They used the environment. They worked together in ways the war apes couldn't predict, and they targeted weaknesses instead of fighting head-on. When it was over, Lieutenant Jin found Day sitting on top of a defeated war ape. The chimp was bleeding from a cut on his arm, but his eyes were bright with victory. "You were right," Jin said. "Your plan worked." Day signed. "Street fighters. We know how to win when bigger enemies come to our territory." In the command center, Colonel Jun watched the footage in amazement. "We won the first battle," he said quietly. Dr. Han nodded. Yes, but the Nurak won't make the same mistake twice. They'll adapt. So will we, said Colonel June. So will we. 3 days after the battle at Seoul, the Nurak launched their full attack. Their ships appeared over major cities around the world. This time, they did not send messages first. They did not offer deals. They simply attacked. Colonel June ran through the hallway of the military base. Alarms blared. Soldiers rushed to their posts. Through the windows, he could see Nurak ships in the sky, much closer than before. Status report, he shouted as he entered the command center. They're targeting military bases first, said an officer. Ours will be hit in minutes. Colonel June grabbed a radio. Dr. Han, where are you? Her voice came through with static. In the lab with the chimps. We're preparing to move them. No time. Get to the underground bunker. Now. The building shook as the first blasts hit nearby. Colonel June steadied himself against a wall. And the new chimps. The ones you've been working on. We have 12 more with implants, said Dr. Han. But they're not trained yet. It doesn't matter now. We need every fighter we can get. A massive explosion rocked the building. The ceiling began to crack. Colonel June pushed his officers toward the door. Everyone out. Get to the evacuation point. He was halfway to the door when a support beam crashed down. It hit him directly, pinning him to the floor. Pain shot through his legs. He could not move. Colonel. An officer tried to lift the beam, but it was too heavy. Go, ordered Colonel June. That's an order. I'll find my own way out. Reluctantly, the officers left. Colonel June lay there, feeling blood spreading beneath him. The building continued to shake. Dust fell from the ceiling. He closed his eyes, ready for the end. Then he heard a strange sound. He opened his eyes to see Dai and Sun, the 2 chimps, standing over him. Dai made quick hand signs to Sun, who nodded and ran off. What are you doing here? Colonel June asked. You should be in the bunker. Dai didn't answer. Instead, he examined the beam that trapped Colonel June. It was too heavy for one chimp to lift. But Sun returned with Wan and Bin. Together, the 4 chimps positioned themselves around the beam. Dai made a sharp hooting sound. All 4 chimps lifted at once. The beam moved just enough for Dai to pull Colonel June free. His legs were badly hurt. He could not walk. Dai picked up the colonel like he weighed nothing. The chimps had always been strong, but the neural implants had somehow made them even stronger, or at least better at using their strength. They moved through the crumbling building with speed and grace that no human could match. When their path was blocked, they found another way. When fire blocked a door, Bin found a vent they could crawl through. When part of the floor collapsed, Wan used some rope to make a quick bridge. They reached the outside just as the building collapsed behind them. Dai carried Colonel June to a medical truck. Why? Asked Colonel June as medics took him. Why did you save me? Dai signed. You treat us like soldiers, not animals. We respect that. Lieutenant Jin ran up to them. His uniform was torn, and he had a cut on his face. Colonel, thank God you're alive. He nodded to Dai. Good work. Dai signed something to Jin, who frowned. What did he say? Asked Colonel June. He says we need to go rogue, Jin translated. The base is gone. The chain of command is broken. He wants us to take the chimps and fight our own way. Colonel June looked at his base, now just smoking ruins. He looked at his injured legs. Then he looked at Dai, whose eyes burned with determination. Do it, he said. Take all the chimps, even the new ones. Take whatever weapons and supplies you can find. Hit the Nurak where they don't expect it. Jin saluted. What about you, sir? I'll be in touch when I can. For now, Lieutenant Jin, you're in command of the chimp units. As the medics loaded Colonel June into an ambulance, he watched Jin and the chimps gather the other chimps and soldiers. They were no longer just following orders. They were fighting for survival. As the ambulance pulled away, Colonel Chimps saw Dr. Han running toward the group. She had a laptop and a small case, her research and the neural implant technology. At least that was safe. The war had truly begun, and Earth's best hope was a band of street-fighting chimps with grudges and the humans who respected them enough to let them fight their way. 2 months passed. The war spread across the world. The Nurek controlled the skies, but they struggled to control the ground. Everywhere they went, they faced not just human armies, but also bands of enhanced chimps who fought in ways the Nurek could not predict. Lieutenant Jin's group had grown. Now he had 20 chimps with neural implants and 15 human soldiers. They moved constantly, never staying in one place for too long. They lived in the ruins of cities, in forests, in abandoned tunnels, wherever they could hide and strike from. They're bringing in their elite war apes, Jin told the group one night. They were gathered in an old subway tunnel beneath what was once downtown Seoul. Bigger, stronger, with better weapons. Day signed. They're learning. But so are we. The chimps had changed in the past months. They were no longer just following human directions. They were creating their own tactics, their own weapons. Wan had designed bombs that specifically targeted the neural control units of the war apes. Sun had figured out patterns in how the Nurek ships moved, allowing them to predict where attacks would come. Dr. Han studied the chimps daily. Something is happening that I didn't expect, she told Jin. The neural implants aren't just making them smarter. They're connecting them. They're developing their own language, their own culture. Jin had seen it too. The chimps would sit in circles, making signs so fast that no human could follow. They were planning, thinking, in ways that went beyond what Dr. Han had designed. Is that dangerous? Jin asked. I don't know, said Dr. Han. But right now, it's keeping us alive. That night, they got a message from Colonel Chimps, who was now working with other resistance groups. A Nurek command ship had landed just outside the city. It was controlling the war apes in the region. If they could destroy it, they might buy Earth more time. It's too heavily guarded, said one of Jin's soldiers after they scouted the ship. There are at least 50 elite war apes around it. Jin looked at Da. What do you think? Day didn't answer right away. He stared at the holographic map they had made. Then he signed something to the other chimps. They broke into their rapid signs, discussing among themselves. Finally, Dai turned back to Jin. He signed, "We can do it, but we need a distraction, and we need to go in our way." Jin nodded. "You have a plan." Dai signed, "Humans attack from the front. Make noise. Chimps go in from below. Below, the ship is on solid ground." Sun stepped forward and pointed to the map. There was a maintenance tunnel that ran near where the ship had landed. The Nurek wouldn't know about it. "It's risky," said Jin. "Very risky." Day signed. "War is risky, but we need to end this." The next day, Jin led the human soldiers in a frontal assault on the Nurek ship. They had all the remaining weapons they could find. They made as much noise as possible. The war apes responded exactly as expected. They moved to defend the front of the ship. Meanwhile, Dai led the chimps through the dark tunnel. They emerged right under the ship, in its blind spot. Using tools they had made themselves, they cut through the ship's underside. The battle above was brutal. The human soldiers fought bravely, but they were outnumbered. The elite war apes were everything the Nurek had promised. Stronger, faster, with better weapons. Jin was pinned down behind a broken wall. A war ape was closing in on him. His gun was empty. This was the end. Suddenly, the war ape froze. Then it turned and attacked another war ape. All around, war apes were stopping, confused, then turning on each other or simply standing still. Jin looked up and saw Dai at an open door of the ship. The chimp had done it. They had reached the control center and disrupted the signals to the war apes. But as Jin watched, a Nurek officer appeared behind Dai. It raised a weapon. "Duh! Look out!" Jin shouted. Day turned. Too late. The Nurek fired. Dai fell. Jin ran toward the ship, dodging confused war apes. He had to reach Da. The chimp had saved them all. He couldn't let him die. Inside the ship, Jin found Da lying on the floor. The other chimps were there too. Having finished disrupting the ship's systems, they gathered around their fallen leader. Jin knelt beside Da. The chimp was badly wounded, but his eyes were still bright. He raised a hand and signed weakly. "Did we win?" "Get Dr. Han," Jin ordered. "Now. We need to save him." As they carried Da out, Jin looked at what the chimps had done inside the ship. They hadn't just disrupted the controls. They had reprogrammed them. They had understood alien technology that human scientists were still struggling to figure out. This was the turning point, not just because they had captured a Nurek ship, but because Jin now understood what Dr. Han had been saying. These weren't just enhanced animals. They were becoming something new, something that might just save Earth. Dr. Han worked day and night to save Da. The chimp leader had lost a lot of blood, and his wounds were severe, but the neural implant had somehow helped his body heal faster than normal. After 5 days, Da opened his eyes. The other chimps had refused to leave his side. They took turns watching over him, bringing food and water to Dr. Han. When Da woke up, they made sounds of joy and relief. Lieutenant Jin came as soon as he heard the news. "Welcome back," he said, smiling at Da. Da signed weakly. "The ship. What did we learn?" "A lot," said Jin. "We captured a Nurek scientist. He's been cooperative." The group had set up their new base inside the captured Nurek ship. They had learned how to use some of its systems, and they had found something very interesting about the war apes. Jin led Da, who could now walk with help from Sun, to a room where a Nurek sat. The alien was smaller than most of its kind, with lighter blue skin. It had marks on its arms that the others didn't have. "This is Tech," said Jin. "He's a scientist who worked on creating the war apes." The Nurek looked at Da with all 3 of its eyes. "So this is the chimp leader," it said in its strange, musical voice. "The one who has caused us so much trouble." Da stared back without fear. "Tell him what you told me," Jin said to Tech. The Nurek scientist pointed to the back of his own head. "The war apes are not naturally obedient. They are controlled. Here, at the base of the skull, we place a neural suppressor. It blocks independent thought. It makes them follow orders without question." Dr. Han stepped forward. "That's the opposite of what our implants do. Ours enhance intelligence without limiting freedom." "Yes," said Tech. "That is why your chimps are so unpredictable, so dangerous. Our leaders fear them because they cannot control them." Da signed. "Why are you telling us this?" Jin translated for the Nurek. "Because I disagree with what my people are doing," said Tech. "I created the war apes to help, not to conquer. I was told they would build, protect, not destroy." Dr. Han looked excited. "Can the neural suppressors be removed?" "Yes," said Tech, "or disabled. Without them, the war apes would think for themselves." Da's eyes lit up. He signed rapidly to Sun and Bin. They nodded and left the room quickly. "What's happening?" asked Jin. "I think," said Dr. Han slowly, "that they've just had an idea." 2 days later, they got their chance to test this idea. A group of Nurek soldiers with 10 war apes approached their hidden base. They had been tracking the resistance. Jin prepared for battle. But Da had another plan. He and 5 other chimps went out to meet the Nurek force, carrying devices that Bin and Huan had built using parts from the ship and information from Tech. Jin watched through binoculars as the chimps allowed themselves to be surrounded by the war apes. It looked like suicide. "What are they doing?" he asked anxiously. Dr. Han stood beside him. "Trust them." The chimps activated their devices. A pulse of energy spread out. The war apes froze. The Nurek soldiers shouted commands, but the war apes didn't move. Then, slowly, the war apes turned toward the Nurek soldiers. One by one, they removed the small devices attached to the backs of their heads. The neural suppressors. A huge war ape, bigger than the others, looked down at the device in its hand. Then it crushed the suppressor and let the pieces fall to the ground. It made a sound, not a roar, but something that sounded almost like laughter. The Nurek soldiers tried to run. They didn't get far. The war apes they had controlled for so long caught them easily. Day approached the large war ape who had destroyed its suppressor. They looked at each other, two different species of apes, both enhanced by technology, both used as weapons, but now both free. Day signed, "Friend or enemy?" To everyone's surprise, the war ape made a sign back. A rough version of the sign for friend. When they returned to base, they brought with them 10 freed war apes and no Nurek soldiers. "How did they know your sign language?" Jin asked Da. Day signed, "They've been watching us." Learning. Inside, they were always aware, just couldn't control their actions. Dr. Han studied the removed suppressors. "This changes everything. If we can free more war apes, we can turn the Nurek's army against them," finished Jin. Day signed, "Not just an army. People. Like us." Dr. Han looked at the chimps talking with the war apes in their mix of signs. "Yes," she said quietly. "People. That's exactly what you all are." The war was entering a new phase. The Nurek were about to face not just human soldiers and enhanced chimps, but their own creations, now fighting for freedom instead of following orders. The main Nurek command center was built on what used to be a mountain outside of Seoul. It was the most heavily defended place on Earth. 5 rings of war apes guarded it. Energy shields protected it from air attacks. The Nurek Supreme Commander directed the war from inside. Lieutenant Jin looked at the holographic map with Colonel Jun, who had returned to active duty with metal braces on his legs. "We can't attack it directly," said Jin. "Even with our freed war apes, we don't have the numbers." Colonel Jun nodded. "That's why we don't attack directly. We use distraction." Their plan was bold. All remaining human forces would attack the front of the command center. It would look like a desperate final attack. Meanwhile, Dai would lead a small team of chimps and freed war apes to infiltrate from below, through maintenance tunnels that tech had revealed to them. Dr. Han prepared special devices for each chimp. "These will disrupt the neural suppressors," she said. "Free as many war apes as you can inside." Day signed, "What about the Supreme Commander?" "Capture if possible," said Colonel Jun. "But the main goal is to shut down their control systems. Without those, all the war apes on Earth will be free to make their own choices." The attack began at dawn. Human forces from around the world coordinated their assault. Tanks, aircraft, and soldiers attacked the front gates of the command center. The Nurek responded as expected, sending most of their war apes to defend. Underground, Dai led his team through dark tunnels. 5 chimps and 3 freed war apes moved silently. The large war ape named Gorn, who had been the first to communicate with Da, was with them. He knew the inside of the command center. "This way," signed Gorn, using the sign language he had learned from the chimps. "Control room at top." They moved through service corridors, avoiding patrols. When they did encounter Nurek soldiers or controlled war apes, they used Dr. Han's devices to free the apes and dealt with the soldiers silently. Finally, they'd reached the main control room. Inside, the Supreme Commander stood surrounded by elite war apes, the largest and strongest of all. The commander was much taller than other Nurek, with red markings on its blue skin. "We need a distraction," signed Da. Sun stepped forward with a small explosive that Juan had made. He rolled it into the room. It released thick smoke but did no damage. In the confusion, Dai and his team rushed in. They used their devices on the elite war apes. Some broke free immediately. Others fought against the freedom, having been controlled for so long. The Supreme Commander shouted orders, but fewer and fewer war apes listened. It drew a weapon and fired at Da. Gorn jumped in front of the blast, taking the hit meant for the chimp leader. The freed war ape fell to the ground. Dad knelt beside his new friend, checking the wound. It was bad, but not fatal. Gorn signed weakly, "Finish it." Day turned to face the Supreme Commander. The Nurek leader seemed unable to understand what was happening. How could its perfect soldiers be turning against it? How could these Earth chimps, these lesser creatures, be winning? "You are nothing," shouted the Supreme Commander. "Animals. Savages." Day didn't respond with words or signs. He leaped at the commander, dodging energy blasts with the street fighting moves he had learned years ago in the fighting rings. The Supreme Commander had never faced an opponent who fought dirty, who had no rules, who would do anything to win. The final battle was short but fierce. The Supreme Commander was stronger, but Day was faster, smarter, and fighting for more than just victory. He was fighting for freedom, for all apes. When it was over, Day stood over the defeated Supreme Commander. The control panels around them were destroyed. Throughout the command center, throughout Earth, war apes were waking up to freedom for the first time. Day signed to the fallen Supreme Commander, not animals, people, with choices. The Nurek fleet retreated within days. Without their war apes, without their command structure, they had lost their advantage. They left behind thousands of freed war apes who now had to find their place on a new world. 1 month later, Colonel Jun and Lieutenant Jin stood before a mixed group of humans, chimps, and war apes. Dr. Han was there too, with Da by her side. "Today we recognize not just victory," said Colonel Jun, "but a new beginning. Those we once called enemies are now friends. Those we once saw as animals are now people." Day stepped forward. His signing had become so well known that many humans had learned it. He signed clearly for all to see. "We didn't win because we were stronger. We won because we knew what we were fighting for. Freedom, choice, home." The war was over, but the story of Earth's chimps and their unlikely allies was just beginning.